Hello everyone, I recently started using ProBuilder in Unity and wanted to share how I approach creating scenes with it. I usually use Blender for blocking out environments, but I've been using Unity more lately to avoid the back and forth of exporting and importing. I do welcome suggestions. If you find a better way to do something, feel free to let me know. To get started, I have a blank scene here opened, and I already have the ProBuilder tool installed. And what I like to do is just add in a capsule 3D model just to use as a character for size reference. I'm going to zero out the capsule location and turn on the grid so I can see its location better. The first thing I'm going to do is create the island, and I'm going to use the cylinder to create the ground. And I'm just adjusting the location here so that it sits right underneath my character. Its polys are quite low, so I'm going to turn up the side count. In this way, later I will have more vertices to move around to create a more organic shape island. I don't want to select through my mesh, and I don't need to select the entire face to have it highlighted, so I'm going to turn off these options. If you hover over them, it will explain in detail how they affect your selection. I'm shaping the island to be more like a hill or a mound, so it should be wider at the bottom and more narrow at the top. Which means every time I extrude, I have to scale it outward. I don't want the island to be a perfect circle, so I'm going to push and pull these verts, edges, and faces around. And I find that using the soft select helps the nearby vertices move along with it. And I adjust the radius and the fall off percentage as I need it. And this looks pretty good now that it's no longer a circle. For the Viking hut, there are many ways to approach it. I find it easier to create a cylinder, cut it in half, and extrude the bottom. Now, this is how I go about editing the cylinder shape. I'm going to turn on this icon up here so I can select through the object and go into wireframe mode. I'm going to select all the bottom faces, and I actually don't need all of them selected. So I'm going to go and deselect these, and I'm going to dissolve it. But it looks like I can't dissolve it in face mode. Maybe I need to be in edge mode. And yet it's allowing me to do an edge mode. And you can see the highlighted purple edges here. Those are what's going to be deleted. I'm going to select the bottom face here and extrude it. Go into object mode and bring the house down. I'm going to do some repositioning here and sizing so that the house sits better on the island. I'm going to make the house a little bit more pointy up here, and then I'll work on the frame of the truss. To make the truss, I find it easier to select all the faces up here, and to duplicate it, I search separate, make sure new object is selected. Now you can tell it's a new object because once I pull it up, you see there's two separate objects here. I'm going to scale this down along one axis. I'm going to apply my transform to this truss because every once in a while I forget to do my edits in edit mode. And I always want to make sure that my scale is 1 especially. I'm going to apply it to the house also. Extrusion in ProBuilder doesn't preserve the original faces. Instead, it moves them forward, which means it leaves an open mesh. So I use this method to cap off my mesh. For example, I created a plane here. In edit mode, whenever I extrude, there's no bottom face. So instead of going in, and especially if it's a complex shape, instead of going in and filling in the bottom face, what I usually do is, let me Control Z this, I create a duplicate. So I hit Control D, here's my duplicate here, and I turn that off. I select my plane, I go into edit mode, select the faces that I want it to extrude, and extrude it up. Now you will see it doesn't have a bottom face. So what I do is I take this one, the face on top here that I made a duplicate of, and I flip them. So I hit Control A, right click, flip face normals. Hit enter. The exit edit mode, you will see it has a face, but it's two separate objects still. So what I do is I select both of them and I merge them. So merge object here, and I want to make sure I weld the vertices at 0.01, and I hit enter. You should see here that it is now one solid object, and by clicking on this vert, you can see it has been welded. For the truss, I'm going to do the same method. I'm just gonna edit the name here so I know which one is the copy. And then now I'm going to duplicate it and then hide the original for now. By hitting Control A, it will allow me to select all the faces at once. I'm gonna extrude it outward by clicking on Extrude Faces. And I have 0.3 here, which is a good distance. It is a bit hard to tell, but you can see here that the original faces have been moved upward. There is no face to cap off the bottom, so by making that copy, we will use it for that purpose. Let's hide the one we extruded, and I'm gonna select the original one. I'm gonna hit Control A again to select everything. I'm gonna right click and then click on Flip Face Normals. When I unhide the extruded version, it looks like a whole object now, but I still have two separate objects. So I'm gonna select them both and right click, hit Merge Objects, make sure Weld Vertices is check marked, and my weld distance should be 0.01. And now it is one complete object. And I want to turn this into a prefab, so I'm gonna edit the name real quick. The reason why is because I want one on the other end of the house and I want them to be identical. I'm gonna drag and drop this into my folder to turn it into a prefab. Now I'm gonna duplicate it and bring it to the back. Now if I make changes to this one and go to Overrides, Apply All, it should update the other one. You will notice that I've locked some items in my hierarchy. It's because I was selecting them by accident and it was starting to get annoying. I'm going to create more details on my truss. Here's a method that I use often, which is creating edge loop, and I do that by only selecting one edge. Sometimes it is easier for me to just right click and search the action I want to do, or I can select it from the panel on the left. I'm going to push and pull these edges around so that the truss has a wonky look. Now I can apply the overrides so that the back side looks the same. I'm gonna create the ridge of the roof, and I'm gonna do that by using the cube and making it a long rectangle. After rotating it, I'm gonna hold down V and snap it to the top of the roof. Oh, that looks like it snapped to something else. I'm just gonna adjust it manually. It doesn't have to be perfect. I didn't want it to be symmetrical. I'm gonna create some edge loop on the ridge so I can create a curve on the top. Again, I do this by selecting one edge only and insert edge loop. Sometimes I find I can just bevel the edges and it creates another edge loop for me. I'm just going to create another edge loop here in the center. And now I can push and pull these edges around to get the look I want. At the top of the house here, I would like to create some sort of creature-like dragon head ornament at the end of the ridge. I'm going to hide everything with Shift H and then turn on the X only grid. The reason why is because I'm going to draw a poly shape and it only draws on the axes that's shown. I'm going to go into isometric view and only view it from one axis. With the poly shape tool selected, I'm going to draw a general shape of the dragon's head. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to edit more later. To close the shape, I just end the vertices back to where I started. Now that the shape is closed, I can see it better, and I'm just going to make some quick modification. So the head here is one large n-gon. I'm going to use the cut tool and create some quads and triangles. It's a bit annoying because every time I connect two vertices, I have to hit enter and then go back and select the cut tool and start the process again. I'm going to see if there's a way to fix this. Keep in mind when you're cutting, the face that you're cutting across has to be highlighted in purple. If the adjacent face is highlighted, it means that the one you're cutting through is not going to work. Sometimes I have to reselect the vert again and highlight the correct face before I cut it. I want to extrude this and make it 3D, but first I'm going to hit Shift V and drag it to snap to this corner of the ridge. There's a small gap in this corner, so I'm going to go to Edit Mode, select the vert, hit Shift V and snap it to this vertice. To extrude, I need to make sure the back face is filled again. So like the truss, I'm going to repeat the same steps. This is where that method comes in handy because I don't want to have to extrude it and fill in the back faces and then have to get rid of the n-gons. I'm just going to rename this to creature for now. And then I'm going to duplicate it, flip the faces, and extrude it. And select both meshes, merge them, and weld the verts. The head is not attached to the ridge of the roof right now, and I think I want to keep them separate because I might make changes to the head later. It's a bit boxy, so I'm going to make a loop cut down the center. Select one edge, and right-click and click edge loop. And again, I'm going to push and pull the edges and verts to get a better shape. I'm just going to slow down this step here so you can see how I did the ears. Because I pulled the verts to such an extreme angle, I'm going to have to make some cuts so that the polygon looks better. Sometimes you get weird shadings, but that's just the face need to recalculate itself. I think the back of the ears will look better as tries, so I'm going to select these two vertices and collapse them. To create the decorative scroll ends at the top, I just use a cube design, extrude it out, select an edge, create a loop cut, and I use the bevel edge to double it up. And then I just modify it to create a nice curve. And then I duplicate that around the top of the roof. I'm going to make some more beams out of the ridge by duplicating it. I'm going to rename this to beam and turn it into a prefab. And I'm going to rotate this and then just modify the curve a little. I'm going to modify the size and scale it along the element angle. In this way, it doesn't stand out as much as the truss and ridge. ProBuilder comes with this default material with a grid, and sometimes I find it too busy. I usually like to create my own material with just a simple color white. I'm going to go to the project tab, and in my folder here, I'm going to create a new material. And then I'm going to choose the ProBuilder material for it. ProBuilder 6, standard vertex color. For the albedo, I'm going to remove the grid and select none. I'm going to select all the game objects in my scene and apply the material to all of them. Instead of dragging the material onto each item, I just drag and drop it into the inspector. I have the ProBuilder vertex color palette open here already. It allows me to quickly apply general colors to my objects. And again, to update my prefabs, I just go to Overrides. I'm just going to quickly apply colors to all my objects now. And just so you know, you can adjust any of the preset colors in the palette. You can also select faces and apply colors to only those selected. I'm going to finish adding the beams to the roof and do some minor tweaks. To create the door entrance, I have the front faces of the house here selected already. And I'm going to do an inset with a distance about 0.8-ish. Well, actually, I'm going to scale it anyway because I want the door size to be different. Let's hide the ground so I can see the bottom of the house. I'm going to delete the underside of the house here and these bottom faces in the front. Now I need to adjust these vertices so they align on the bottom. I have the shape of my door created, and because I want an inset inside the wall, I have to keep the shape here. I'm going to duplicate this by right-clicking, selecting Separate, and making sure New Object and Duplicate is checkmarked. This is my duplicated object here, and I'm going to rename it. I want a slatted door, so first I'm going to dissolve these inside edges so I have a clean face to work with. I'm going to change the color to dark brown and move it forward so I can see it better. With the cut tool selected, I'm going to do some vertical cuts along this door. I'm going to separate these slats, and the reason why is because I want to make loop cuts along the center of each slats, and I can't do that if they're all connected to each other. I don't need to make them all individual objects, I just need to separate them so they're not bordering each other. I will eventually merge them all back together. I can't find my gizmo when I select the door. That means that the pivot is where the house is, because this face was originally part of the house. I just need to select a face and set my gizmo to this new location. And I just need to repeat this on the other door. I have the faces selected here, and I'm going to extrude them forward. Now I like to create some variations in my slats, and this is how I do it. I select an edge and create edge loop. Hit enter, and I only scale the front edge. I'm going to repeat this process to the one on the left, and I want the edge loop closer to the top. And again, selecting the edge facing me and shrinking it. I don't mind that it has a twist because it gives it variation. And now I'm going to repeat the process to the one on the right and the other half of the door. And by changing the color slightly, you can see the gaps between the slats. Looks nice, but let's create a horizontal brace across the middle. I don't want to add too many, just one will be enough details. I'm using the cube to draw a horizontal brace across all the slats. Exactly like what I did with the slats, I'm just doing loop cuts and moving verts around. At this point, I'm going to merge all the door game objects together, and I don't need to weld the vertices. To have the door swing from the left side, I'm going to select an edge over here and set the pivot to this location. I want the door to be partially open, so I'm going to rotate it just a bit. And if you remember, I created the door from these faces that I inset here. What I'm going to do is extrude these inside so you can see the depths of these walls. I don't need these faces on the bottom, so I'm going to delete them. I want to suggest depths behind the wall, so I'm going to darken these faces. If I remember later, I will add a material that doesn't receive shadows in this area. Looks like I forgot to name this door, so I'm going to do it now before I forget. And I'm going to hide it so it doesn't get in the way when I'm trying to create the door frame. I want the door frame to match these interior faces, so I'm going to select them and duplicate it. I do that by right-clicking, selecting separate, making sure new object and duplicate is checkmarked, and hit enter. Now I'm going to select these edges and pull them forward. I'm going to hit Ctrl A to select everything and click on Extrude Faces. I'm going to change the distance number. I want it going outward, not inward. And I just need to edit the name over here. You can see here that the faces are inverted. It's because I extruded -3. So I'm going to go to Edit Mode, select everything, right-click, and select Flip Face Normals. I'm going to hit Shift-H to hide everything so we can see this better. Again, when extruding, it doesn't keep the original faces. Instead of using my duplicating method, I can just select 2 edges and bridge them. Another trick I found out is if I fill every other faces, I can select the remaining edges and click on Polyfill Edges. And this help makes it easier. Back to the house, as you can see, these interior faces are competing. To avoid that, I would need to delete the faces that are connected to the house. The door frame is too uniform and symmetrical, so I'm going to move some edges around to make it look less even. The next thing I want to do is add a decorative shield, like a crest design above the door. I'm using the cylinder again, and by holding down Control, it keeps the shape even. I want it to be more round, so I'm bumping up the side count. I actually don't need the cylinder for this, just the circle. I'm going to select the faces here, right-click and search Invert Selection and hit Backspace to delete the faces. I want the shield to look like it's made out of planks, so I'm going to dissolve these edges. Now that I have a clean face, I will create some vertical cuts with the cut tool. I'm just going to move some birds around so my planks are less angled. To give it dimension, I'm selecting every other faces and separating them. This time I don't need to make duplicates, so I'm going to uncheck mark this. Now I'm going to extrude this but slightly off from one another. The shield needs a border, and to create one I'm going to use the pipe shape. I'm going to draw it right on the shield. It's a little thick, so I'm going to bring the thickness down and add some more side counts. Let's position it here, and the shield is still 2 separate parts, so I'm going to merge them together. Now I'm going to line both of them up and resize them. I'm assigning some colors just so that we can see what it looks like. It's a bit plain, so I'm going to add a dome-shaped boss to the center. I'm going to scale the front face down and insert an edge loop here and scale it up a bit. I'm going to drag in my material onto the object so I can see it without the grid. I'm going to add a dark color and see what this looks like. It's off center, but I'll adjust that later. Let's add a horizontal plank across the middle also. I forgot to add the back side of the door, as you can see here, so I'm going to do that now. I want to isolate this door, but for some reason Shift-H is being buggy on my keyboard right now, So I'm going to go up here and click this icon and it will hide everything. And if I click on the door, it will make it visible. I'm going to speed up this process of the video. Just like before, I'm going to find two opposite edges and bridge them. I thought adding some support beams on the bottom would be nice, just to add some sort of design element. I used a simple cube to create this, and add some edge loops and push some faces around. This one, it's important that I turn it into a prefab because I'm going to make many copies of it. And now I'm going to finish the house by duplicating this onto the other side. This first half of the video covers most of the basic tools and techniques I use. Continue to part 2 to see the rest of the process.